Vice President Kamala Harris's team interviewed at least 3 potential VP picks over the weekend, and she's expected to make her decision public before the start of a week-long campaign tour that kicks off tomorrow in Pennsylvania. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has the story.
Vice President Kamala Harris met with her top 3 VP contenders over the weekend. She met with Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, with Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, and Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota. Senator Mark Kelly was first elected in 2020 in a special election to complete the remainder of the late Senator John McCain's term in Arizona. A former Navy captain, Gulf War veteran, and NASA astronaut who piloted the last mission of the Space Shuttle program, Senator Kelly is married to former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who survived an assassination attempt in 2011.
Kamala Harris has been across the country, for the last, week, meeting with the American people. She's available, accessible. Kamala Harris is the candidate of the future for this country. She wants to bring down the cost of prescription drugs. Make child care affordable, reduce the cost of health care for the American people.
Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania is a former attorney general and shares a background as a prosecutor with Vice President Kamala Harris. Governor Shapiro was elected in Pennsylvania in 2022 and beat then Republican Doug Mastriano by double digits. Shapiro, raised in a Jewish household, has called for an immediate 2-state solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and has been a strong critic of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Winning Pennsylvania will be critical to reach 270 electoral votes.
She is obviously uniquely aware of the importance of picking someone who she can run with and win with and, of course, govern with. And I know she will make this decision, as she makes every decision, in the best interest of the American people.
Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota rose to top VP contender for the Democratic ticket after criticizing former President Donald Trump and vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance in a video clip that went viral. Tim Walz is a former educator, Army National Guard veteran, and former U.S. congressman with strong ties to labor organizations in the Midwest. Vice President Kamala Harris and her VP pick will make their first joint public appearance Tuesday evening at Temple University in Philadelphia before kicking off a week-long tour through the Battleground states. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
We're watching the stock market, which took a dive this morning. That's amid fears of a possible U.S. recession surfacing over the past few days. How will this impact the presidential election, though? Joining us to discuss is Luis Perón, political consultant and author of Beat the Incumbent, Proven Strategies and Tactics to Win Elections. Luis Perón, thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, U.S. stocks took a nosedive this morning. This follows a weak jobs report and shrinking manufacturing and construction. If the U.S. is headed for a recession, how do you think that will influence the campaigns between Trump and Harris and ultimately the voters?
Well, as I write in my book, Beat the Incumbent, elections are always a referendum on the incumbent. Now, Kamala Harris is not the incumbent per se, but she's of course part of the incumbent Biden-Harris administration. And so I think that would not be good news for her, because right now already an overwhelming majority of Americans in every poll I've seen think that the country is headed into the wrong direction. And so that would just be additional weight on her neck.
So let's analyze both Trump and Harris's campaigns. What do you see? What do you think each of them can do better to win over undecided and the independent voter?
Well, I mean, Kamala Harris is off to a great start, right? I mean, there's great enthusiasm, there's money, there is volunteers, but sooner or later the honeymoon will be over, right? So, and then it's really her record. I mean, the record of the administration that is a liability for her. And I mean, in particular, immigration. So for swing voters, undecided, she needs to address that issue, immigration. For Trump, it's a very different story. Actually, I wrote a piece for Real Clear Politics a while ago on how Trump can win, and I think he has to start reaching out in a meaningful way to swing voters. I mean, there's no doubt he has a very enthusiastic base, but he's probably the most polarizing politician on earth right now. So while they are very enthusiastic about him, they all only can vote once. So in order to win under normal circumstances, he needs to reach out in a meaningful way to undecideds.
What are some examples that would look like for both Trump and for Harris?
Well, I mean, for Trump, if you look back at his time in office, I think if he did any outreach beyond his natural base, I think it was with black men, and it worked actually surprisingly well. So he needs to do more of this. I think for Kamala Harris, of course, that would be her base. So her undecideds are somewhere else. And I think for her, it's really a question of geography, because her supporters, she has tons of supporters on the East and on the West Coast, but not where she needs them. And that's why I think for her, the way to 270 goes through, I think, a handful of states. So that's where her focus needs to be.
So according to Real Clear Politics polls, former President Trump is slightly ahead of Harris and is leading in about 6 out of 7 battleground states. How important are the polls at this stage, ahead of the DNC and ahead of the potential first debate that could take place between the candidates?
Yeah, I wrote another piece for Newsweek. The polls are close but meaningless. I mean, no offense, but polls in the US in particular have been skewed for several cycles in a row. So I'm not taking them with a grain of salt, but with lots of salt. And actually, I have a suspicion that maybe Trump is doing so good in the polls because pollsters have finally adjusted after cycles and cycles of underestimating him. But still, I think it's a while to go. We don't know what will happen in the world. We don't know how the economy will be felt, how the wars develop, and ultimately who will show up and vote. So I think we have to live with the fact that this is a close election and will remain to be a close election.
Luis Perón, thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me.
And now leaked documents show disagreement among Israeli officials, and this amid Israeli Defense Forces confirming the death of a terrorist leader. NTD's Fiona G has the latest in the Middle East.
Leaked records over the weekend show disagreements between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and heads of Israel's domestic and foreign intelligence agencies. The officials say they believe they could reach a ceasefire deal if Netanyahu lets go of some of his demands, which the prime minister is refusing to do. In the U.S., Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has ordered the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier strike group to the Middle East. The move is meant to support Israel and boost protection for U.S. troops. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said his country needs to be ready for an attack from Iran. According to Lebanon's Ministry of Health, an Israeli airstrike Monday killed 2 people in Lebanon. Strikes on 2 schools being used as shelters in Gaza City reportedly killed at least 30 people Sunday. Israeli officials say the attacks targeted and killed Jabir Aziz, commander of Hamas's Al-Furqan battalion and a major organizer of the October 7th attack. As fears over an escalation in the conflict rise, diplomatic efforts continue. Jordan's foreign minister visited Iran Sunday and met with Iran's acting foreign minister. This marks the first visit of a Jordanian official to Iran in 2 decades. President Biden spoke with King Abdullah of Jordan on Monday. They discussed efforts to reach a ceasefire and hostage release deal. Meanwhile, the commander of U.S. Central Command spoke with Israel's chief of the general staff. The officials discussed strategic and security plans for the Middle East. Biden is convening his national security team Monday afternoon to discuss developments in the Middle East. Fiona G, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.